Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video. My name is Matt Dilks, and I am one of the directors at Christopher Shaw. I'm here with my fellow colleague, James Tiller, and today we welcome Phil Noble from Goodlord. He is the product lead for Goodlord. Goodlord is a prop tech service that provides agents with a comprehensive referencing and e-signing platform, and we're very grateful for you to join us today. Phil, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And today we're going to be talking about something which isn't necessarily new, but there are some changes coming up on the 30th of June, if I'm not mistaken. This is the right to rent regulations, which have been in place for a long time, but obviously with Brexit happening and still happening, there are going to be some changes very shortly. So we'll run through some questions on that, Phil. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So we'll lead off with one, which is, let's just strip it right back to basics. For those who don't know what right to rent is, what is its history and what is it?
So back in 2016, the UK Home Office introduced essentially immigration checks for applicants who want to rent, so right to rent checks. And what it does is it ensures that any adults in England have the legal status to actually live in the UK. The kind of really important thing is the legislation actually puts the responsibilities onto the landlords to ensure that their checks are carried out. So they're liable for any punishments rather than the renters. And essentially all renters above the age of 18 have to go through these checks. And to be honest, since 2016, for the large majority of renters, it's just been an ID check. So if you're British or from the EEA or an EU citizen, you just need to show your landlord your passport, and that's enough. And it's something that you would do anyway because it's an ID check. So really, over the past kind of 5 years, it's not been a particularly massive issue.
Big addition,
yeah.
So, Phil, would you mind just explaining to us the changes that are coming in from the 30th of June to these new right to rent checks, or the changes that are happening then?
Yeah, so from the 1st of July, as part of the UK's exit from the European Union, any EEA and Swiss citizens will no longer be able to prove their kind of right to rent by just presenting their passport or national identity card. They are actually going to have to prove their settled status or their indefinite leave to remain. The key thing there is that because before Brexit, anyone that was based in the EEA had freedom of movement, so you could settle anywhere within the European Union. Post-Brexit, that isn't the case now, and you have to essentially prove your immigration status alongside anyone that's not a UK or Irish citizen.
Okay, so what happens then if you are an EU citizen that's coming across to the UK, you haven't been here before, not lived here before, and what happens to them in terms of what they need to prove and what they need to offer now? So say this is obviously after maybe when Brexit happened on the 1st of January.
Yeah, so over the last 12 to 18 months, the government have been doing quite a high-profile campaign to encourage EU citizens to apply for a pre-settled status or settled status. And essentially what that means is that I have the right to remain in the UK post-Brexit. So they've been doing that through an online service where EU residents can actually provide all of their information, show that they've been in the country for a set amount of time and that they actually have the correct immigration status. And by doing that, it's provided the foundations for us to actually start doing these right to rent checks online. So anyone that has a settled status can now go onto the UK government's website and actually provide that information to agents, tenants, and also in terms of like right to work checks as well, that applies for that as well.
So I guess that's the most significant change that there's been in the right to rent check procedure now, is the fact that a lot of it's gone online now.
Yeah,
I guess helps companies like yourselves and agents like ourselves to make that check quite simple.
Yeah, I think essentially what we're doing is we're moving away from agents and landlords to checking the nationality of tenants to actually checking their UK immigration status actually proactively.
Yeah, nice. So obviously over the lockdown and the many lockdowns that we've had, there was some provisions that were put in for just allowing digital checks. Is that going to be switching back mainly to physical now?
So It's an interesting one because obviously the government announced a few weeks ago that that was going to revert back to in-person checks from the 21st of June. And up until the 30th of June, agents and landlords aren't allowed to require tenants to provide the digital checks. So it's a little bit strange one because from the 1st of July, as an agent or landlord, you can say to an applicant, please use this online service and we'll check it digitally and I can verify your identification via video call. So you don't have to do it in person from the 1st of July. And you don't have to do it in person up until the 21st of June. But there isn't anything anywhere in those 9 days. My assumption is that that won't be the case and you can move away from in-person checks essentially.
Do any move into those 9 days is the answer to that one.
Yeah, there is a slight caveat. So there will be some applicants that don't have access to the online service, people that have a Vignet or a visa in their passports, or they have indefinite leave to remain physical documentation. Those checks will still have to be done in person, but the vast majority of applicants will have used this online service or will use this online service.
Great. And do landlords need to carry out retrospective checks on EU nationals who currently reside in their properties?
In short, no, they don't. So if they've already moved in, then they won't have to do that. Essentially, if the move-in date is before the 30th of June, then the passport is good enough. If they have a timed settled status or a timed visa, then when that visa expires and they come up for a renewal, then they will have to do that. There is some caveats around that. If it's an AST and it just moves into a rolling contract, they're not required to do that. But if it becomes essentially a brand new tenancy, then they would need to kind of prove the immigration status of the applicant.
Yeah, so it's probably just always sensible to check on renewals just to be sure.
Yeah. And again, if it's just a simple AST that's just rolling over month to month, then they wouldn't have to do that.
Doesn't need to. Great.
That's interesting about that. Because so it would suggest then that if you do a normal fixed term renewal with someone that might have been in the property for a long time, you do need to do the check on to check they've got the settled status because it's a new tenancy.
From the 1st of July. So yeah, essentially the wording is that if it's a new fixed term agreement that the tenant's entering into, then it would be necessary to carry out a new right to rent check.
Quite a big challenge for a lot of landlords and a lot of agents, I think, when they do those renewals over the coming months. So that's interesting to learn. So what should be done if a tenant doesn't have the appropriate documents or doesn't have the appropriate code or what have you? What should be done in that instance?
So if they don't have the appropriate documentation, then you can't rent to the applicant. It's on the applicant to kind of prove that they have the right to rent status. They can apply to the Home Office to get that documentation, but it is on the applicant to do that. What the government have done to simplify the things is with this online service is all the information is actually it's now digital. So really it's only going to be people that no longer has the ability to right to rent, and it just means that you can't move forward with the application.
Of course. And what are the penalties for non-compliance? Say something fell through the net and a check wasn't done. What are the penalties for non-compliance?
Yeah, they're pretty tough actually. So there's two types of penalties. There's a civil penalty, which is a fine of up to £3,000, and also there's a criminal penalty of up to 5 years in prison. So they are, quite harsh penalties for not doing these checks.
It's scary. So that leads us on to a nice point. We mentioned this off camera before we started recording. Is obviously you only work exclusively between yourselves and agents. This is a chance for you to plug yourself, Phil. But what are the benefits of using an agent that uses someone like yourself at Goodlord?
I think it's baked into our process to ask for that information. So historically, we've always checked the documentation to make sure that it is right to rent applicable, and then we give the agent the ability to then quite simply compare the documents in person with the applicant. So it becomes a very smooth and fast process.
Yeah.
What we're doing with the changes is, and I don't think I talked about this, but basically what the government are doing is they're enabling tenants to be able to share the information really simply with agents and landlords through what's called a digital share code. So the tenant would go online, log into their platform, and essentially create a share code that they can send to the agent or landlord. The landlord would then log online, enter the share code with the tenant's date of birth, and they will see a picture of the applicant and how long they have settled status, or if it's undefined, unlimited settled status. So what we are doing post 1st of July is we're kind of bringing all that together within the referencing report. So you've got a link to the actual checking service, you've got the share code, you've got the date of birth. So that check again will be incredibly quick and seamless. And longer term, what we are looking to do we're investigating how we could potentially automate that process completely. So we can come back to you as an agent and say, yes, that person has a settled status, and here's a copy of here's a screenshot of that actual settled status with an image of that person. You can then check via a video call, again, to make it simpler. There are a few kind of challenges in the way of doing that. Most notably, the government doesn't have the technology required for us to do it quite so simply, but I know there are groups that are working quite closely with them to kind of start to bring that up to speed.
Fantastic. I mean, tech does make the whole process easier. I wouldn't necessarily want to be doing that as an individual without any tech support or these things that make it a lot easier. It's certainly becoming harder to toe the line as a landlord, and you can quite easily get it wrong. This is why we tend to outsource this ourselves, because it is a very tricky subject, and you do need good partners on board that just make sure that you're not making simple mistakes, which can obviously get you in a lot of trouble. So it must be even harder as a landlord.
Yeah, definitely. I do think there are increasingly more and more barriers for the landlords, and if there's anything that we can do to help reduce those, then it's something we'll look at, because again, like you said earlier, if we can make you look good to your landlords, then everyone's a winner.
Yep, and give us a call because we've got the best tech out there. James,
thanks a lot, Phil. Really appreciate your time talking us through this and these changes that are really significant. It's probably one of the biggest Brexit-related changes, I suppose, that have come into our industry. So it's really useful for you to come and share that information with us today, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So thank you for joining us. If you are still here to the very bitter end, then we would very much like to work with more landlords across the Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch area. We are a local independent agent based in Bournemouth Town Centre, and we do cover that very broad area of the lettings market. So do get in contact. Our number here is 01202 554470. My name is Matt, or you can ask for my colleague James Tiller, and we very much welcome your call, or you can visit our website at www.christophershaw.co.uk. Thanks, guys, and thanks for joining us again. Take care.